I suspect many of you were at the opening rally, so you know there was an anti-fascist demonstration called in Piraeus for Thursday night. I'm happy to report the demonstration was very successful. The gathering of the fascists was tiny, they were protected by the police, and the turnout of the anti-Nazis was the biggest seen for many years in Piraeus. I'm also happy to say it was one rare occasion in Greece where we got the left united. So can we beat the Troika? That, of course, comrades, is a 300 billion euros question. That is the size, approximately, of the Greek debt. And that's what at stake. Can we cancel that debt? Or will workers in Greece be forced to pay through the nose for years and years to come? The answer is yes, we can. The way things have developed in Greece, there is a very strong movement that can beat the Troika and move towards victory. The reason why we say this, well, there are three main reasons for making a claim like that. The first is that even the new government that has been installed after the second round of elections we had on the 17th of June is very weak. The second reason is that the left is on the rise. There's been an explosion of the percentage of people who voted for the left, both on the 6th of May and on the 17th of June. And the third reason is that revolutionaries can play a big role in leading that movement to victory. So let's take these questions one at a time. The Troika government is weak. We call it the Troika government for two reasons. One reason is because they are the government that implements the dictates of the Troika, the European Union, the European Central Bank, and the IMF. This is probably internationally known as the Troika. It's known in Greece as well. Well, that's the Troika of the exterior. In Greece, we have a Troika of the interior. And that's the New Democracy, the Greek Tories, PASOK, the Greek New Labour, and now they have a new partner, the Democratic Left. So this trio has formed a government after the elections of the 17th of June. It is a Troika government in every sense of the word. To win the election in the way they won it, marginally. The people who campaigned for them include Angela Merkel from Germany, François Hollande from France, Mario Monti from Italy. So it is literally a government that has been elected with a lot of outside help, a lot of pressure on the Greek people that if you vote the wrong way, if you vote for the left, then you'll have to face consequences that were spelled out in a really nasty way that will turn Greece. That's what the European Union leaders were threatening, that they will turn Greece into the Gaza Strip, the same way that the Palestinians are isolated and blockaded. That would be the fate of Greece if it voted for the left. And despite that, well, it didn't save them. Let's put it that way. There was a huge collapse for the vote of the combined Troika parties. PASOK shrank from 44% to 12% of the vote. New Democracy had gathered 33% back in 2009. They went down to 19% on the 6th of May. almost half their vote, and then they rebounded to 30% on the 17th of June with the help of other small right-wing parties when they appealed for unity on the right, and they gathered everybody together. The third partner used to be the far-right Laos. They collapsed completely. They didn't make it to parliament. So one indication of the problems that they face is that a government that used to have as a partner the far right now is obliged to pick a partner from the left. They have taken the democratic left into the government. The democratic left is a recent breakaway from Syriza to the right. The main point, however, is not just that the new government is electorally weak. It is politically weak. It is politically weak because it campaigned on the promise that they will make austerity lighter in Greece after the election. Yes, I'm talking about the Tories, the Greek Tories. They were promising that they will renegotiate with the European Union, the European Central Bank, and the IMF to make the terms of the memorandum agreement that finances the Greek debt less severe on workers. Now that, of course, was a lie, and it has been very, very quickly exposed as a lie. In yesterday's Financial Times, there was a report that the Greek Prime Minister made a statement to the Financial Times that there is going to be no renegotiation with the Troika. There can be no renegotiation from their part with the Troika for a very simple reason. The crisis in the Eurozone is getting worse. There is no leeway that the people who run the Euro can offer better terms to Greece. And that is the basic weakness of this new government. They campaigned on the slogan that's either the Euro or catastrophe. Either we stay within the Eurozone or it will be the end of Greece. And part of that campaign was the promise that they can make staying in the Euro means austerity, but the austerity will be lighter. That is a huge contradiction, and it makes them exposed even to the people who voted for New Democracy, PASOK, and the democratic left. So we can say for sure that the way the economic crisis is developing and the way this government has been elected, that there are more revolts on the way in Greece. Because even the most conservative elements have hopes and expectations that the new government would mean an improvement, and the immediate prospect is that there is going to be no improvement, things will be worse. Well, you can take it from me, and I think most of you believe that workers in Greece will not take it easily if the attack continues. The second reason why this is true is because the left is on the rise. And that is always an indication of confidence inside the working class. Now, the rise of the left in Greece is meteoric. Syriza, which is currently the largest party in electoral terms, got 27%, just 2 points behind the Tories. It was a very close-run election, and it was touch and go whether Syriza would be the leading party or the Tories would be the leading party. 27% is a percentage that no Greek left party has ever achieved since 1958. That's decades ago. And 1958 was a year when the then united democratic left got 25% of the vote. And what followed from 1958 to 1967, when we had the military junta, was a decade of struggle. 1965 was the Greek 1968. Before May 68, we had an explosion in Athens, and that was July 1965. So that gives you an indication for, in Greek society, what it means for a party of the left to get more than 25% that people remembered from the 50s as an explosive percentage for the left. So they got 27%. And then on top of that, we must add other parties of the left, the Communist Party, the far left, other movements that fought against the Troika and were part of the election. So all in all, it leads to percentages in the working class areas around Athens and Piraeus. The left, the broader left, is an absolute majority. It is above 50%. That includes the democratic left that has joined the government, but we must count the people who voted for them as part of the broader left, because they didn't vote for their party in the expectation that it would support Troika policies. They voted for their party in the expectation that it would oppose Troika policies. So 50% in the working class areas is a huge percentage. It's something that has not been seen, well, in Greece it has not been seen, but there are not many countries where you get the left as an absolute majority in working class areas. And it is not just an electoral wave. It is an explosion of radicalization that before it expressed itself in the ballot box, it was very visible in the streets. These are people who voted for the left through a process of radicalization where their ideas changed, their ideas were radicalized because they were part of a very strong movement. They were part of strikes, 20 general strikes in 2 years. That, you know, when you use numbers, it's easy to destroy the impact of things. 20 general strikes. 1 every 6 weeks, comrades. 1 every 6 weeks. There are many sections, militant sections of workers who, in between these general strikes, had their own strike days, like transport workers in Athens, metro workers in Athens. They had another 20 days of strikes in between the 20 general strikes. That works out, they were on strike every 3 weeks. So, you understand, when we say radicalization through experience of struggle, this is a true description of workers in Greece. There are also other things along with the strikes. There was the occupation of the squares last summer, where thousands upon thousands of people, more people than actually were taking part on the strike rallies during the strike days, were occupying the square in front of Parliament in Greece, and many other squares in smaller cities across Greece. It was a movement inspired by the Egyptian revolution, by Tahrir Square in Cairo. It was inspired by a similar movement in Spain. So that is also part of the wave that drove workers forward in Greece. There were also experiences from the occupation, not of open spaces, but of government buildings, ministries. In October, last autumn, there were about 15 government ministries that were occupied by the workers working in the ministries. There were occupations in the Public Electricity Corporation. There were occupations in the media when bosses went for redundancies or reductions in salaries and so on. So, and on top of that, there were many fights with the police. These you probably have seen on your television screens. Again and again, the experience of people fighting back includes days of action when the streets of Athens were full of people. The police would use huge amounts of tear gas to clear the streets, and it would take a day and a night of fighting with the police before people would retreat. That's what happened on the 12th of February, and that's how we overthrew the government of the bankers that had been constituted after PASOK had collapsed. At that time, the German finance minister was saying the Greeks cannot have an election, they cannot afford an election. Well, he got his answer on the 12th of February when, I don't know, 500,000 people were out on the streets, and it took a day and a night for the police to clear the streets. After that, they decided we have to have an election. So when I say it's not... So when I say it's not just electoral radicalization, this is a wave that has been built through struggle. And these are people who have lots of experience in fighting back. This is very important to keep in mind, because not everybody on the left in Greece agrees that it is important that we've had this surge of support for the left. The Communist Party disagrees. They say the result was negative. Now, this is a huge mistake. They're using the wrong yardstick, comrades. Their criterion is the vote for their own party. That went down on the 17th of June. So because the Communist Party vote went down, their estimate is that, well, the working class has gone backwards in Greece. We use a different criterion, right? Our criterion is not our own party, it's the class. And the class has made huge strides forward. So the result was fantastic. Syriza may not have won the government, but the left has huge percentages across the areas of the working class throughout Greece. So this is a reason why we say a weak government with a confident working class, with a crisis deepening, there will be more sparks flying in Greece in the coming months. Now, that doesn't mean that it's up and away all the way. Of course, there are problems and difficulties. Of course, there are open debates inside the left on the way forward. And this is where the role of revolutionaries is very important. It is very important because the leading party of the left, Syriza, is promising to end austerity through negotiations inside the European Union and the Eurozone. Now, that is a promise that is creating a lot of problems, because part of the promise is that there will be no unilateral moves of a government of the left in Greece. If we get a government of the left, if this movement, well, didn't succeed in this election, maybe we'll do it in the next election, which will not be in 4 years' time. I think the climate of political crisis makes sure that the government will not last for another 4 years. A government of the left will have to face the question of what it does vis-à-vis the pressures coming from the Troika. A position that has been taken by the leadership of Syriza, that there will be no unilateral moves on the part of a government of the left in Greece. There will be no cancellation of the debt, no freezing of the debt. That's what they mean by unilateral moves. It'll be through negotiations, step by step, with the Troika to improve the terms of repaying the Greek debt. Now, that is a trap. That is the equivalent of a trade union leadership going into negotiations with the bosses and saying at the outset, there will be no strike, there will be no occupation. If you want to negotiate a better contract, well, let's negotiate a better contract, but we won't have any unilateral moves on the side of the workforce. I think this is obviously the wrong way to go about it. And that is the position taken by the Socialist Workers' Party in Greece, and by the coalition of the anti-capitalist left under Sia, which is to the left of Syriza. We have argued that the Syriza leadership must drop its commitment to the euro and include in its program, yes, we will have unilateral moves against the debt, against the bankers, and that will, if that entails a break with the euro, well, we'll have a break with the euro. That is our position. And I think that the fact that the Syriza leadership takes a position like that is something not for the future, what will happen when we get a government of the left and the negotiations open, but it's something that's pressurizing Syriza in the here and now. They are under pressure to behave themselves, to offer responsible and loyal opposition to the government that is doing the U-turn now, that there's going to be no renegotiation. Now this is something that is a factor in the political situation in Greece. It means that it opens the door for further shifts to the right by the Syriza leadership. And there's a lot of pressure by the Greek ruling class for things to move in that direction. Let me give you an indication. Kathimerini is a leading paper, conservative paper in Athens. I would say it's the equivalent of the Daily Telegraph. They carried an editorial on Tuesday of last week. The editor of the paper, the most authoritative figure. And he said, there's a nightmare scenario coming up. A nightmare scenario from their point of view. If this talk about changing the memorandum, scrapping the memorandum, opposing the memorandum continues, then what will happen is this government will not last very long. Then we will have a Syriza government, and they will have to behave themselves once they are in office. What will happen then? We'll have the loonies of Andasia leading the movement. Now, this, of course, is Redbaiting, right? Things are not going to happen that way. The development of a political crisis is never linear, comrades. So we are not basing our expectations on what the Tories are saying about the government collapsing and then the left collapsing, and that will mean the revolutionaries will be leading us into the madhouse. I'm just quoting this as an indication of the pressures that the ruling class is applying on the left to keep things down, to calm things down. And of course there is another factor that we have to take into account, that as the crisis gets worse, there is the danger of the fascist threat. You've probably all heard that part of the election result was a 7% share of the vote for a neo-Nazi group called the Golden Dawn. Now that is an amazing result. That neo-Nazi group is a group of street-fighting thugs, and for them to get 7% is a real threat. It's a result that has made everybody in Greece suddenly realize that it's not one way. We may have had fantastic struggles, we may have had a fantastic surge of the left, but the danger from the right is not just the Tory government. There is also the threat of the Nazis rearing their head. So the question of fighting against the Nazis is very much on the mind of everybody. It is a result that came about. Firstly, there was a far-right party, an almost fascist party, Laos, and they were part of the government. They collapsed because they supported the government, and the neo-Nazis benefited from the collapse of the far-right. So that was one element. The second element was the racist campaign by the previous government. Both parties, both New Democracy, both the Tories and New Labour, were absolutely disgusting in terms of the attacks on immigrants. Not just words, not just a racist propaganda about immigrants being to blame for the loss of jobs, for the deterioration of the National Health Service, and so on. We've had this vicious propaganda, but also attacks by the police, attempts to gather the immigrants into concentration camps outside of Athens, outside of Salonika. The new Labour minister who was responsible for public order in the previous government was the person who promised 30 concentration camps for illegal immigrants in Greece. Now, if New Labour can behave like that, well, all the Nazis had to do was to say, well, you know these politicians, they say they will put the immigrants into concentration camps, they'll never do it, we will do it because we fight them in the streets. That's how they grew. So we have to escalate the anti-Nazi work. Escalate is the right word. On our part, we have been campaigning for quite some time. Now we are getting the support, we are reaching the stage where we can get most of the left to unite in fighting the Nazis. So there is progress on this front, but we have to see that it is not only on the anti-fascist front that we have to build the movement. We have to build the movement to oppose the new attacks on the working class. And there is, of course, the question, this is the last thing that I have to address. Can the revolutionary left help the working class respond in this new round of attacks that's coming up and a new round of revolts from a confident working class? Can the revolutionaries play a role? Have they been squeezed out of the scene because of the election result? The fact that Syriza got most of the votes and the anti-capitalist left was marginalized electorally. Has that made a difference? Well, the answer is no. And the reason why the answer is no has to do both with the politics of the electoral campaign. Many people who voted for Syriza did so on a tactical basis, under pressure that if Syriza came the first party, they would receive the bonus of the electoral system in Greece that gives the first party 50 seats in a 300-seat parliament. So lots of people whose sympathies were for the revolutionary left voted tactically. So that's one element. And these people had a lot of respect for the electoral campaign of Andarsia, for the fact that Andarsia in the election campaign was raising the question of the euro, the question that Syriza was ducking. There was this huge attack by the Tories that breaking with the euro means catastrophe. Syriza was saying, the left will save the euro, and we were saying we will need a break with the euro. Now there are thousands of militants at rank and file level inside Syriza that agree with us. They may have voted for Syriza, but they agree that we will need a break with the euro, and we will need to build the movement and the strikes and the occupations on that basis. So we are not isolated, comrades. This is the first thing. The second is that this was not something seen only during the electoral work, the election campaign, and the debates and discussions that we had in many workplaces while we were carrying out the election campaign. We can see it after the election. There were trade union elections in a number of unions after the parliamentary election. And the far left did very well. I can give you an example. The Metro Workers Union used to be controlled by PASOK. They had 6 seats out of 11. They had an election just a few days back. It was the far left that got 6 seats out of 11. It means people who used to support PASOK switched to the left, and they went for the fighting left, the most fighting section of the left. The other parties of the left were part of the election in the union. Syriza ran candidates, they won 1 seat. The Communist Party ran candidates, they didn't win a seat, they got 12 votes. They are completely isolated because they are completely sectarian. Andalusia is not sectarian, people realize that there is a difference. So, this is where we are at the moment. What we have in mind is that we will have to campaign to help people organize the fight back in the coming months. One initiative that we have taken is that on the 30th of September, we are calling for a national assembly of rank and file groups from workplaces or throughout Greece. This is an important step. When people had to organize their general strikes, their own strikes, their occupations, they had to do this from the bottom up, because the trade union bureaucracy may have called the general strikes, but they were swept along by workers' anger. So there are many areas where people have had to organize at the rank and file level, and getting these people together is very important. There are sections of workers that have been out on strike for a long time. You probably have heard about the steel workers just outside Piraeus. They've been on strike for 250 days, and they're still going strong. After the election, there was an attempt by the boss to break the strike, bringing in the police and strike breakers. It was beaten back, the workers fought at the gates, and we won the battle. The strike goes on. So we want to get these groups of workers together to organize for the fight back in the coming months. At the same time, we want to continue the debate inside the left on what to do against the pressures coming from the European Union leadership. The question of an anti-capitalist program. We say that Syriza must not shift to the right. We want to work together with the best militants that have hopes in Syriza, that the program will include a cancellation of the debt, a break of the euro, and nationalization of the banks under workers' control. This is a platform that we will be campaigning in the coming months. There are many, many activists who want to see a campaign like that taking momentum, because this is the way to make sure that the rise of the left will not be wasted. It is an opportunity, it is a huge opportunity, and there's a clear need for revolutionaries to make sure that the opportunity is not wasted.
I'm sure, well, I'm the branch secretary of the UCU here at UCL, in fact, so welcome, Marxism. That's my first point. The second is this, that in my union branch, we raised a motion which was put out by the SWP in solidarity with the Greek resistance. And we got the motion through our branch, we put it to our National Congress. And that motion did not refer to dropping the debt. And I think that was a mistake. And I think we have to popularise the slogan of dropping the debt in a very serious and very pragmatic and internationalist way. And I say both pragmatic and internationalist. We need to make the argument that we in Britain and across Europe and across the world must not let Greece stand alone against the bankers. Secondly, we have to make the argument that this is actually a popular argument and a necessary argument, because if Greece stands alone, then we will in turn will stand alone too. That we stand together, or we're on our knees. And I think this is absolutely incredibly important at the moment. If you think about the arguments in the British working class movement about can austerity win, there is whispers from the Labour Party to the trade union bureaucracy to the right that says we can't fight, Labour is going to get elected, and don't leave it, you know, we won't even oppose the Tory cuts. Beginning the argument that says that here in Britain you have to fight the Tory cuts, the first part of the argument is to demand dropping the debt. We have to create the oxygen to blow on the sparks and the embers in Greece and spread a conflagration against the euro, against the bankers and against the whole rotten system. And I think we can do that in a very straightforward way. There is a campaign for dropping the debt in Britain, in Greek debt. It's called Jubilee. It's a Jubilee debt campaign. We have to use that as a springboard for massively popularising it and demanding that TUC makes the same demand. My union passed a resolution almost completely unanimously calling for the Greek to drop the debt. If UCU can do it, every single union in this country can do it.
Angela Merkel claims that when she takes the hard line on the Greek people, she has the mandate of the German people. And she's pointing out to as you know, there has been a vicious anti-Greek campaign conducted over 2 years by the German press. When there was the game Germany against Greece, one of the main papers had a title with the German football team with the heads of Merkel. It said, "Level Merkels you should be, hard but fair." This is the extent of the campaign. On the basis of the campaign, there are polls conducted in Germany where 70% of the Germans said we're against another rescue package for Greece. And that is taken as a justification to say, look, the Germans don't want any of the good money thrown to the Greeks. What was never asked afterwards is the motives why people say that. Because it isn't not just a racist nationalist sentiment. The whole left is campaigning against that kind of rescue packages. Die Linke has, in parliament, voted against those kind of rescue packages because they come with Troika policies. They are a bailout for the bankers. The whole basic message that it's not money for the Greeks, but it's money that's given to the Greeks, which is then collected again by the German banks. This is an argument for natural support. So in reality, there are huge pools of empathy for the plight of the Greek people inside the German working class, and you can mobilize it. We had a demonstration in Frankfurt against the fiscal compact, which was basically a demonstration not against cuts in Germany, but in Greece, Spain, and so on and so on. 30,000 people came out. In a festival of international solidarity, basically, and if you can organize it, it's not a nation against nation thing. It's a class thing, and you can organize it.
No, the question that the whole question is, what happens, let's say, which probably will happen quite soon, because they've already forced them to have one election, if Syriza and the left wins the election? Because the whole question I thought is, well, by the sound of it, the European Union will not accept their victory. So, could we be seeing a repeat of the military coup, but with sort of European kind of blessing? Because the thing is that, like I said, the Gaza option, I don't think that statement is scary in a sense, because Greece is a small country. It can't, if the European Union decides to crush Greece, then Greece will find itself in a very desperate situation. Well, it'll lose. It'll just be quite hard for Greece to successfully defy the Eurozone without the resistance spreading to Spain, basically, and Italy or whatever. But that bigger context is the main hope for Greece in a funny sort of way, because if you think about it, if Greece gets attacked, but other countries are in the same way, then that might actually simply bring about the sort of death knell of the European Union. Because if it's forced to act in that way, in a drastic way, then it could destroy the European Union altogether. Because lots of other countries might simply fall out over the issue. But basically, yes, that's what a summary really. A summary is that Greece could be potentially be the straw that broke the camel's back. What's the word? The thing that sparks the complete end of the Eurozone, precisely because they will have, if they choose to act collectively against it.
Very good question. We have your assessment on the role of the military today, not only from the perspective of policemen and military being much in favor of the neo-fascist party, but also the historical role of the military. I mean, all through the Metaxas dictatorship, civil war, and the junta period.
Comrades, probably rather like Panos and a number of other people in this room, I've been around the block a number of times now, and therefore I cannot tell you with what joy I listened to Panos's report from Greece, because it is obviously stupendous, really, when you read his reports in Socialist Worker, what the Greeks are doing. But the implications for our country in the UK are as important. And they are as important because I'm sure every one of us in this room constantly has to meet the cry of the Jeremiahs. We can do nothing. Austerity is going to go through. To do things, to demonstrate, to raise the banner of resistance doesn't fit the 21st century. And what Panos has explained to us today is the basic revolutionary socialist idea, which was first enunciated by Leon Trotsky. He said, when the masses enter the stage of history, then all plans are thrown up into the air. And we have to argue that the experience of Greece can be applied to Britain. It means to say the October the 20th demonstration is enormously important. The Greeks, for God's sake, have got rid of 2, possibly 3 governments, forced 2 general elections, 20 general strikes. There's the answer to the Jeremiahs. It's happening not in a far-off country, but in a country of Europe. But even more importantly, I believe, what Greece has done is to put back onto the agenda socialist arguments and socialist solutions, like nationalise the banks under workers' control. How many years is it since we've heard that? Those are the implications for us, which is why this meeting is so important, and I believe many other reports in the months and years to come will take us further down the track of regenerating socialism.
I want to stay on the issue of the euro, because in the international debate in the left, internationally and in Greece, there is this issue whether the euro thing is a false dividing line that we should not put huge emphasis on. But we need to remember that in Greece the thing around the centrality of the euro issue grew out of the debate around the debt. And it was the anti-capitalist left that took the initiative to open up the debate around the debt. Whether the working class should pay the debt, whether it is legitimate or not, and whether we should pay it or whether we should say that we should scrap it. In the beginning, the reformist left, the big parliamentary left, was indifferent to the issue. The Communist Party said that talking about the debt will lead us to reformism. And the Syriza leadership said that we're not against paying the debt, but the issue is how do you diminish the deficit? Do you diminish the deficit by taxing the rich, or do you diminish the deficit by taxing the poor? So this was the crucial thing. This debate is now over in Greece. It has been won. and the anti-capitalist left played a leading role in that. It has been, you can go to bookshops, to bookstores in Greece, and understand how much it has been won. All the bookshops are full of books saying how the debt is illegitimate and we don't need to pay. So after the debate about the debt, we had the euro thing as a blackmail, that if you want to break with the debt, then you will need to break with the euro. This is how the debate was said. The failure to answer to that blackmail, because actually it is a blackmail, will make many people in the left who are honest about not paying the debt go backwards in the issue of the debt. So if they don't give a clear analysis, a clear answer on the issue of euro. This is very important, because now the program, the economic program that the senior economists of the Syriza leadership are putting forward is a program of balanced budgets and surpluses. Balanced budget is the program of the Republican Party in the United States. So if you are not to be with the balanced budgets and the surpluses in Europe and in Greece, definitely you need to be with a break with the euro. This is why it is a crucial dividing line, and this is why the anti-capitalist left that has led the debate around the debt will need to lead the debate around the euro and win over this argument.
Right, comrades, I'm speaking here from a perspective of being in Dublin, and the Irish ruling class has a slogan at the moment that they used relentlessly during the vote on the treaty recently, which is Ireland is not Greece. They said over and over again, and you people at the left, you want to take us down the road of Greece. When I hear this, I am reminded actually of another slogan or set of slogans that I'm sure you all know from Pastor Niemöller in the anti-Nazi struggle. You know, first they came for the Jews, and I said nothing because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, I said nothing because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, I said nothing because I was not a trade unionist. We're in the situation, first they come for the Greeks, oh, but we're not Greek. Then they'll come for the Spanish, but we are not Spanish. So we need to reverse that. We are all Greeks. We are all I've got to be quick. Oh, damn. Right. I wanted to say, I'm going to say it anyway, because it needs to be said. I want to sound the question of Syriza. Right. When Syriza did so successfully in the elections, even before the second election, the whole European left went mad for Syriza. And of course, if Syriza had won, this would have been a tremendous step forward, as Panos said. But you know, I think people forgot a lot of historical experience, because if Syriza had won, this would not have solved the problem. If Syriza had won, what we'd have faced was another huge battle, because the whole ruling class of Europe and the Greek ruling class and the Greek police who voted for the fascists all would have come for them, and so we wouldn't have won. We would have been in an extremely dangerous situation for the ruling class, for the working class. We don't know exactly what the result was, but the battle would have become more intense. And what I want to say here, because I know they've had a lot of criticism, but I congratulate our comrades in SEC and Anticapitalist because they understood that. They didn't suddenly forget all the historical experience of what happens when you get a left.
I'd like to raise the point that surely what the Greek working class must do must raise a series of transitional demands that they can work around. One of the ones that occurs to me that's pretty obvious is make the rich pay their taxes. At the present moment you have a series of tax fiddles that allow Greek shipping millionaires or billionaires to avoid taxation. You have, as I understand, in the Greek equivalent of Harley Street, the majority of hospital consultants are saying they only earn the minimum wage. You also have the fact that in this country, where people pay millions of pounds for expensive houses in the West End, it's not the Arabs and it's not the Russians that have been buying the properties in the last year, it's the Greeks. Well, I would say one demand to raise is if Greeks now domiciled in Britain temporarily don't pay their taxes, we'll confiscate the property they own already in Greece.
All right, just quickly, 3 of us from Real News went over to Greece a couple of months ago to film, and I've got to say we came back feeling incredibly inspired by what we saw over there. We spent all our time meeting the social movements that were reflected in that big vote of the left that we saw. And we came back feeling like this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is not just solidarity with a movement that's struggling. This is a movement that can win, that can stop austerity and can lead a Europe-wide movement against it. And what inspired us most of all, I think, was to see all these people doing stuff like, you know, rank and file committees forming, doctors occupying hospitals, one hospital virtually under workers' control for 3 weeks, people doing collective kitchens, not paying campaigns, solidarity networks building up all over the place. But most of these people had never done anything 2 years ago. These are new people, and I'm not sure this comes through. Most of the people out in the streets doing stuff were not activists 2 years ago. It really felt like something was changing. That whole idea of workers' control, it's not theoretical, that is a real discussion going on with practical examples going on around it. And I'll just urge people, go, just go. If it has anything like the effect it's had on us, if we got 100 people going over there, the effect that would have on the movement over there. We've got people talking when we're showing the films now about twinning schools with schools over there, hospitals with hospitals there. Great idea. If you want to see a bit more of what we filmed over there, we're going to do a guerrilla screening in the main quad in UCL, you know, where all the stalls are. We're going to project onto the side of the building when it gets dusk from 9:30 tonight, if you want to have a look. And if you want to help us get back there when the struggle goes up, help us by buying our DVD outside. Thanks very much.
Richard Whitebar from the SDPP in Ireland. Really, I have to say that whatever, we have very serious criticisms, if you like, of Syriza and what they might have done, what their negotiating strategy and so on might be. But to fail to understand that a victory for Syriza against the Tories in Greece would not have wiped the smile and arrogance of Angela Merkel's face. Fail to understand the situation, but on the other side, and this is the important point, on the other side, we need to understand, if you like, sorry, is it too close?
Yeah.
Too close. On the other hand, we need to understand that the thing that frightened Angela Merkel most and the European ruling class most was not Syriza, but the resistance of the Greek people. It was the 20 general strikes. Insofar as that gained political representation, of course, that is a big worry for them. But the thing they are terrified of is the possibility that resistance on the scale that we have seen in Greece will spread across Europe. That is their fear. And it is that fear that we want realised. And our response, if you like, when the Irish Prime Minister essentially promoting the idea of Ireland scabbing on the Greek resistance, which is what he's saying when he says we are not Greece, our response to that was to print t-shirts saying we are Greece multiplied by 3 and to precisely promote the Greek Style resistance. And I just also want to say a word. I mean, I've heard...
Sorry, quick.
Very quick. Is I think Panos is absolutely right on the question of having to say cancel the debt as a key, if you like, red line slogan in dealing with the current situation. Because in a little bit like Syriza, Sinn Féin in Ireland refused to say that. They say, we don't like the deal, if we were in government, we'd get in and we'd negotiate hard with Angela Merkel, but won't make that threat. And the government told them and say, you mean default, but you won't say it. And of course they won't say it, but we have to be, and are the ones who say, yes, default, default, default,
The 18th of June, the day after the second Greek elections, the editorial of El País, which is the main social democratic newspaper in Spain, started with the sentence, if Syriza had won the election, the risk of contagion would have been fatal. Which of course, we could take that in several ways. But of course what it reflects is a complete panic, not just in the Spanish ruling class and all their allies, like the Social Democrats, but throughout Europe,
of what a victory for Syriza would have meant. And this is how we have to understand that question. Now, what they meant, of course, why are they saying this in Spain? Why were they so terrified? The PP, the right-wing government, assumed that if the right won in Greece, it would solve their problems. They were actually holding out, not asking for the bailout, because they hoped that the Greek elections would go the right way, from their point of view, and everything would somehow go back into place. Well, in fact, the opposite had happened. The following day, after all their triumphalism about the victory of the new democracy, all the indicators of the state of the Spanish bonds and so on were more negative than ever. And a few days later, of course, they were asking for the bailout of their banks, which they pretend, of course, is a loan. Now, politically, for the left in Spain, there's tremendous enthusiasm about Syriza. You know, our attitude to it as revolutionaries is to say, well, you know, say some of the points that comrades have made, you know, that actually Syriza perhaps, you know, there's a whole series of problems here. But we also have to understand how people see that. You know, they see it as a party that's going to fight, cancel the debt, even though they say they're going to negotiate to cancel the debt. They see it as a party that's talking about nationalising the banks. And it gives us an opening to talk about those issues now. There's massive popular support for the idea of cancelling the debt, the idea of nationalising the banks, the idea of not paying, of reversing the cuts. This is a reality. It's a reality reflected in opinion polls and anyone you talk to in the workers' movement in the Spanish state. So what happens in Greece is absolutely central to what happens in Spain, and what happens in Spain is absolutely central to what happens in the rest of Europe. Spain is the fourth largest economy in the Eurozone. It's twice as big as Greece, Ireland and Portugal put together. So the future of the Eurozone, the whole future of their edifice, the whole future of the European Union at the moment centres on this weak link and on the fantastic struggle of the Greek working class. And this we have to understand. It's going to have a tremendous impact. Their crisis is not going away. They don't have a solution.
So, well, I've got to thank all the comrades. Their contributions were really inspiring, because that's what we will need, comrades, to keep the fight up. We'll need a lot of inspiration, and I think this meeting was helpful in that direction. So let's see the questions and the issues raised. On the question of the threat of a military coup, now, I know in Greece we know about this very well, because in 1967 it was the army that crushed the movement that was unleashed by the victory of the left in the 1958 election. So we are very aware of the need not to have a repeat of that. It took 10 years to beat back the movement. But in the end, they were successful. This time around, it is more difficult for them. I think there is no immediate prospect of the army stepping in Greece. For this to happen, they need a lot of preparation, and they are not in a position. Not in terms of what the role of the army is in Greek politics now. The role of the army has been reduced during the past 4 decades by the way that the military junta collapsed in 1974. They were completely discredited, and that meant that the generals had to take a back seat. That was not the case in Greece during the 50s and the 60s. They were very prominent, so it was easy for them to organize a coup back then. Now it is not like that. They've had to take a back seat, and if they are going to be used again as the long arm of the ruling class, they'll need a period of preparation. They are not there, and it is part of the task of fighting back in Greece that there will be no preparation for a coup. On the question of making the rich pay their taxes, now that is very important. It is part of the program, the anti-capitalist program. Greece has been in a debt crisis for a very long time. The Greek debt crisis did not originate in 2008 when the Lehman Brothers collapsed. there's a debt crisis since the 80s. The original debt crisis started back then. The Greek budget has paid 622 billion to bankers since 1985 to 2009. That's a huge sum, way above the Greek debt. And yet the Greek debt was never repaid. This is how the bankers operate. It's a debt trap. And throughout these years, where we've made all these repayments, the Greek ruling class used the opportunity to reduce the taxation on themselves. The ship owners don't pay anything. And the biggest corporations in Greece used to pay 35%, now they're down to 25%, and the prospect is that the Troika will help them reduce that to 15%. So they're moving in that direction, and part of our argument, the anti-capitalist argument, is that they have to be taxed heavily, and they have to be penalized when they're tax dodging. And who can penalize them? We cannot trust the corrupt Greek state to do that. We need workers' control for the taxation of the rich as well. Now, on the question of solidarity, this is very important. Greece is a small country. The threats that Greece will be isolated have been already used. So the question of organizing solidarity is very, very important. And the fact that in the last few months there have been demonstrations with the slogan, "We are all Greek," is very, very important to us. It's even more important when comrades from Germany say that this includes Germany, because Germany is the stronger capitalism inside the European Union. And to say that the German workers hate the bankers as much as the Greek workers is the basis for our solidarity, and it's our hope that when we move ahead, we will not be alone. The comrade who pointed out that in organizing the solidarity campaign, we have to raise the question of dropping the debt. Now, this is equally important, because solidarity has to have both the immediate aspect of not allowing the European Union, the IMF, or the forces that be to strangle Greece. We have to turn it upside down, that it's also a movement that's helping workers everywhere, and that is the importance of raising the question of cancelling the debt. It's a demand that can make the workers' movement more powerful politically in every country. So using the Greek example to raise a demand like that helps workers everywhere organize their movement on a much better basis. So we will continue the campaign on cancellation of the debt, no matter what the complexion of the government in office in Greece. And this brings me to the last point, the point made by John Molyneux, that a left government is not the end, it is only a beginning. This is a very important point. Now, we don't underestimate the importance of a breakthrough for the left winning the elections. This is very important. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind what that means. It will not be the ministers, even if the left sends its best people in the ministries, they will be powerless unless there is a movement from below that can make sure that the program, the promises of cancelling the debt, of taxing the rich, of nationalizing the banks, become reality. It will not be the ministers that will make this a reality. It will be workers themselves taking over the banks, the ministries, like we have occupied in the past few months. This movement foreshadows what will happen if we come to a situation like that, and this is our hope. This is why we focus on building the rank and file. This is why we say we have this contradictory relationship with the left reformism of Syriza. They make the promises. We have to make sure that the movement is there to make them a reality. This is the relationship we have, and this is why it's very important to have a strong revolutionary left in Greece. The Socialist Workers' Party is part of that forefront. I'm proud to say we are at the forefront of that effort in Greece, like comrades everywhere.